Hey guys, it's Olivie Blake, and this is me not writing. So, welcome to another edition of this. Just so you know, Alone with You in the Ether is now out again in paperback. It's been really interesting having this book be sold to a larger audience than I intended. I feel like it's just being real when I say that because it's definitely, I think I've said many times, this book just it's not for everyone. It's for people who have felt unworthy of love and people who know what it's like to feel fundamentally unlovable and people who are waiting to be given a reason to live and not just be alive but want to be alive in that like sort of hungry way. Just this mix of like ambition and purpose. And I know there are some people who read it in what I consider to be bad faith and take it as an indictment of, mental health treatments. And I would hope if you're reading it, if you're really reading it and trying to understand it, that's not what it's about at all. It's not about pills being bad or whatever. Although I want to be honest about how hard it is to start being treated. I think that you know, there's a mix of wanting to be supportive of medication as a way to get through life, which is definitely true. But it's also very difficult. I worked, as I've said this many times, I worked in the public defender's office as a law clerk, and I worked with a lot of clients, defendants who had diagnoses either the same as mine or similar to mine, and they were then put on pills that were, again, the same as mine or similar to mine. And a lot of them were like, I just hate the way these pills make me feel. Like I feel sick all the time. That was the thing. I mean, when I was first on lithium, I was so sick for like months. I would, and there was, and every time you try a new medication, there are side effects and you have to deal with those. And so there were times that I would go running out of a dinner with my husband's family, when he was just my boyfriend, because I had to go like throw up in the bathroom because something just wasn't sitting right. And like, I'm not trying to say pills are bad, of course not, but like the process of treating mental illness is just trial and error, which means that in the error, and there is lots of error, there is, some form of suffering. And to have to go through that and still be uninterested in actually getting better, like that's what makes medication worthwhile, is the desire to be better. And when we enter this book, Regan doesn't want to be better. She is totally uninterested in engaging with herself and her life and her narrative. um and that's significant. And I shouldn't say that to you because I know you guys, if you're here listening to me talk, you already like the books and you probably enjoy this one. So this is a totally pointless defense, and I'm literally preaching to the choir. But I think that the best reactions that I get from Alone with You in the Ether are the people who say this is the book that made me get diagnosed, or this is the book that made me feel like it was okay to seek help. Because that is the point. That is the point. The point is not being on medication or rejecting medication, because what's significant in the story is that Regan does eventually engage with her own therapy, and there is certainly, this is just meant to be the first year in a very complex life and a complex relationship. And so the process of like finding stability and finding health is much, much longer than that. And it's just not what the scope of the book was. I was just trying to, I wasn't trying to teach anyone how to engage with your mental health. I was just trying to tap into that feeling of like, I'm just not interested in my own health. I'm just not interested in myself. I don't think I deserve good things. I don't understand like how I could ever change. Like that's the person I'm writing to. And I'm also, telling a version of my love story, which what was significant about my love story was that it made me unselfish. It made me seek the help I always knew I needed, but I wouldn't have done that just for me. I didn't love me enough to get help. I didn't love me enough to want to be healthy. I loved him enough. And, sure, that's, you can look at it as something that's romantic. You can look at it as something that is a little codependent and deeply unfeminist. And so what? It gave me a reason to want to be alive. And I don't think I have to. So it's not my love story, of course. This is not my love story, but it is it is how realizing that I was connected to other people, that my life could matter, that to me was worth writing about. And I hope it means something to you. And now that it's in paperback, that means, the audience will broaden again. And I know there are lots of people who are going to call it a contemporary romance and be very disappointed by what they find. And there's going to be people who think that I'm a terrible spokesperson for mental health, and so be it. But if you want it in paperback, it's available now. Okay, I didn't mean to talk about that. So I also, please check out my amazing sweatshirt, which was made for me by a good friend, Danielle. So next fall, the story anthology Januaries is coming out. This is going to answer a few of your questions as well. So some people are asking me, the things that have been pulled from Amazon, the self-published stuff, it's not coming back. Alpha is not coming back because Little Kimura, we started Alpha. That was like our first collaboration together. It was our first like experience self-publishing. We didn't necessarily know what we were doing and what was like the best way to do things. So in terms of efficiency, Lil Kimura used an art style that is too demanding of her time, and it's not something like, it's just not her style. She was busy. She was finding her style in much the same way I was finding mine. And so even though I have written Alpha Part 3, she does not have the time. And I say this with complete understanding. She doesn't have the time to focus on that, which is good because we have exciting things coming for Clara. Like, I can't wait to tell you about it. But anyway, so what we're probably, we decided that we didn't want people to continue spending money on something that was probably not going to be finished in that medium. So, apologies to those of you who already have it, but you will see the ending. I think we're going to make it available. We're going to do like a webtoon version of Alpha sometime in the future with like a different art style, but it'll be the same story. So you will get the ending eventually. We will get there. But we are focusing on Clara right now. And I also didn't want to, like, Amazon was raising prices on their, because KDP, Amazon prints on demand, and they were raising their printing costs and their margin of profit as well. And I just didn't feel like my pre-tour stuff just doesn't really measure up to the polished quality of the actual tour products. I did all my own interior design, and I wasn't really very good at it. Lots of people have complained, like, the actual product, the book, is not as good as it could be, as it should be. It just isn't worth what we're asking you to pay, basically, because a lot of that gets eaten up by, again, the Amazon profit margin, as well as the printing costs. So I have pulled all of that stuff. It's not coming back. We're not re-releasing it either, except for some of the stories that were in the fairy tale collections are going to be in the January's anthology, which is coming out in the fall. Brings me long way around to this. The January anthologies is about half new material, half like the favorite stories. One of the things in the January's anthology is the wedding vows that I wrote for Danielle and Charlene, and just with no explanation. It's called The House, and it's essentially like the speech that I wrote for them to have at their wedding, and I liked it. It was basically about marriage and about the way that getting married and choosing to get married and choosing to give your life to someone else and to say yes to forever is like building a house of many rooms, but you're only able to be in one room at a time. It's a very complex architectural metaphor. You'll see. But that is in January. So anyway, Fashions by Danielle. So I did make the Galloween, thing on my computer. So I did make the Galloween March Madness bracket. I was going to put it on Tumblr or Twitter, but then I'm looking for the, I couldn't decide whether to put it on Tumblr or Twitter because Twitter is a disaster. And engagement has gone way down, and I don't know if you guys want to use it because it's a mess. And I'm not totally sure your data is secure on there. But also Tumblr, I have heard that you can't access Tumblr without an account now. So that's, I don't want to force you to make a Tumblr account. I'm not trying to lure you into the wasteland that is Tumblr, although I do enjoy it there. So I'm going to do a Google form and I will post it to all my social medias, and you could do it that way. Because I'm just trying to have fun. I tried to match up, so the first round, I tried to put like I didn't want, Heath Ledger in 10 Things I Hate About You taking out Chris Pine in The Princess Diaries 2 in the first round, So I tried to arrange them so we have like Shane West in A Walk to Remember versus Ryan Gosling in The Notebook. Or like if you I would hope that, if you're more familiar with like the earlier part of the era versus the later part of the era, then you have Tom Hanks and You've Got Mail versus Colin Firth and Bridget Jones's Diary. I have like Omar Epps in Love and Basketball versus Jonathan Rhys Meyers in Bend It Like Beckham because of sports. I was originally going to do like multiple roles so we could have Heath Ledger in A Knight's Tale as well as Heath Ledger in 10 Things I Hate About You. But it turned out that like there were so many people to include that I just didn't do that. So there's some people that might be missing. And if you think people are missing, you probably should have told me more people when I solicited you for a list. Who else is here? I think this one will be interesting because I don't know if people will agree with me on this, but I have done Ryan Phillippe in Cruel Intentions versus Dev Patel in Slumdog Millionaire, which is kind of like a deep cut. Also, what else is here? Sean Patrick Thomas in Save the Last Dance versus Oliver James in What a Girl Wants. We've got some variation here. I was also going to do like The Girls, but that felt like a bigger endeavor because there are definitely like rom-com heroines that should be on there more than once. Like, how do we decide which Reese Witherspoon? Like, I don't know. So, so anyway, that's going to be available for you to play around with. Galloween. I just want to say, I find the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce thing very funny. Like, to me, it's so obviously a PR relationship. Like, maybe it's real too, in which case, cool. Like, good for them. We're all born in 1989, so like, cool. Like, I was joking with my husband that I was like, I feel like Taylor Swift told the NFL, like, okay, I will date someone, but like, they have to be on a team that like goes with my signature style. So it's got to be red, and like, it's got to be like, who's the like hottest single character that we can find, like who has the biggest platform. I'm just playing around, but anyway, I do want to say I am very grateful for the resurgence of the NFL via Taylor Swift bringing women, because 12th Night coming out next year involves football, and my British editors did want me to limit the amount of football that was on the page, which like there's only a couple of scenes, but understandable. They're like, who cares about American football? And to be fair, many like the reason it took a really long time. I wrote 12th Night before The Atlas Paradox. Like I wrote it right after My Mechanical Romance, and it took a really long time to sell. And part of that is because it involves football, and video games and RPGs, and many people in publishing don't think there's an audience for that, which I think is crazy. Sometimes book people can be really out of touch because like if the older generations of book people like only like books, you know what I mean? So, and they weren't necessarily I'm not excluding everyone in publishing. I'm just generalizing that like there is not a lot of people who share a love of football and a love of gaming, as well as a love of Shakespeare and of books, So a lot of publishers were unsure, a lot of editors were unsure if there was a market for this. And so I'm very grateful to Taylor Swift because now I feel like I don't have to justify the fact that there's football in the book. Again, there's not very much of it. Also, I think this is so funny. So Jack, who is our masculine lead, he in the copy it says he's a quarterback, and I was paying so little attention that I forgot to correct it. He's not a quarterback. He is a running back, which I chose because Mr. Blake was a running back and he had many, 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 many knee injuries. He's had like 9 knee surgeries. And so I built a lot, like Jack gets injured. That's essentially the inciting event for him in his side of the story, which is what leads him to 12th Night, this MMORPG that's kind of like World of Warcraft. And that's how he spends his time while he's recovering from his injury. And I just sort of like, I was able to get like the sensory experience of the injury from Mr. Blake, which is why I made him a running back. And then I just completely blew past it when I noticed that the copy was just like, oh yeah, he's a quarterback. It's like, you know what? That's fine. That's fine. We'll get there. I had some questions. I think mainly the one that I wanted to answer was, so someone asked me like what a prodigy means, that it's not a term that's used very often. And I did talk about how when I wrote Masters of Death, I was kind of dealing with the fact that I was no longer a prodigy. So what that means, so a prodigy is basically someone who's very naturally talented from a young age at something, usually something specific. But I think I meant it more in like that in the US, you get identified as gifted and placed in gifted and talented education when you're like 9 years old. You basically, like, someone identifies you as someone who should take the GATE test, gifted and talented education, in case you missed that. And then you take this test, and it's mostly pattern recognition, as I recall. Like, I remember taking the test. I remember that it was basically pattern recognition. And like, it was just like testing like critical thinking and deduction, basically. And eventually, like, over time, so at first they put you in GATE classes that are like move at a quicker speed. Like, they identify you as a student who can learn quickly, and like cover more material. But then gradually, like, the GATE thing means less because it happens so early that people who are identified as gifted like don't necessarily keep up when it comes to the actual rigor of academia. I was a GATE kid and I was advised to skip a grade. I didn't. I'm grateful to my mom for that. I think I would have struggled with my social development, and instead my teacher just gave me a bunch of like advanced math, so it worked out. I had like a really high reading level, and I remember the difficulty in that was that we would have to go to the library and pick out a book that was at our reading level. But when I was in 5th grade, I had like a college level reading level, which meant that I could only read like the old classics. But I'm really grateful for that too, because that's why I read The Count of Monte Cristo when I was like, I don't know, 11 or 12. It's not, and it's not like that advanced. I think it was more in like the high school range. Like, you could definitely read The Count of Monte Cristo and really enjoy it in high school. I think a lot of people do. And like, I read The Handmaid's Tale when I was way too young for it. Like, my exposure to literature happened very young, and I wanna. Oh, I wonder if I have it here. Yep, here it is. Okay. When I was I don't know if it says when this was written. I don't know. I think I want to guess that I was like 12. And oh yeah, okay, here. Yes, I was 12 and won this novel writing competition. But like, fast forward to the part where I was asking myself, like, what have I done with my life? So the gifted child to clinically depressed pipeline is a very established thing. I think we know that, like, being trained to like be motivated by, the gold stars, it can lead to this sort of feeling of emptiness later down the road. And for me, that was exacerbated by being the child of an immigrant who, like, I think in my heart of hearts, I wanted to be an artist. I wanted to be a writer. I have always fallen back on writing. Like, when times in my life get hard, I write. But that never seemed like something I could really do, because I think as the child of an immigrant, you're constantly trying to pay back this investment in you that, that your parents move here for a better life and they struggle so that you don't have to. But that struggle, like the definition of success becomes this, like, you need to succeed by a certain metric. And I felt that I was really failing. I felt that, the pressure to be successful in a way that, like, my mom could understand is what led me to law school. But then the tension between the fact that I didn't want to be a lawyer, and that even though that becoming a lawyer would have meant safety, financial safety, and professional success and respect. And that was what she wanted for me. That's what she wanted for me. And none of this is to, like, obviously, maybe not obviously, I do believe It is true. My mom just wanted me to be happy, but she also wanted me to do it in a way that she could understand. And I wanted to do it in a way that she could understand because it felt like that was the only thing I could do to pay her back for everything she'd given up for me, for the many lives she could have had that became this, difficult one for me. And so that pressure of feeling unsuccessful and not knowing what I wanted to do, I find that there are a lot there are a lot of white authors who are asked like, how long have you wanted to be a writer? And it's like, oh, I've always wanted to be a writer, and I've always had this dream. And for me, it's like backwards. It's like I never thought this was a real thing. And now we can say like, okay, that investment was worth it. That now I'm so lucky. I think about this all the time. I'm so lucky to that you can point to me and say that's someone who has been successful and that it was worth the sacrifice. But what if art never made for a viable lifestyle? What if it was something that I felt I was, what if I felt this way, that it was exactly the right thing, I was exactly in the right place at the right time, and it felt so like, for me, writing just feels like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. But what if that didn't lead to financial safety or financial viability? That would have weighed on me and my mom, and it would have made me question like what have I done, and what does happiness actually mean, and what does it mean to be someone who had all this promise? Like that's what a prodigy is someone who had all this potential, and it gets, and being a failure later in life doesn't it doesn't undo the prodigy years. It doesn't undo the potential. It just means you failed to live up to it. And so it's like once you get that gifted label, everything after that is this incredibly depressing struggle to live up to what everyone said you should be. And that's what it means. And that was the struggle I was having when I wrote Masters of Death, was like realizing I'm about to be 30. As a woman, 30 is like, I mean, for everyone, sure, but especially as a woman, to feel like, my desirability is going to go downhill. My worth as a person is going to, like, it's something that should be intrinsic. I'm still waiting for the gold star. And that's the kind of energy that goes into Masters of Death. It's just like, well, what now? I used to feel excited by life and I don't anymore. And I'm not sure what comes after this. What happens to a prodigy that fades into obsolescence? And that's something I'm still afraid of. Like now, even though you could say, yes, this person has been successful in publishing, I don't see it that way. I still see myself like working from a sort of starvation mindset of like, what if this all goes away? What if it all disappears? And you can reassure me all you want. People do all the time. My editor tells me I've made it, but I will never feel like I've made it. I will always feel like I have to keep fighting for the next A, the next A in publishing. And I think, yeah, that's just built into me now. That's just how I think, and it's how I work. And that can just be really stressful. And that was the kind of anxiety that is present in Masters of Death. And I do think that in my later works, like what I'm working on right now, I'm going to take the next couple weeks to finish that manuscript. So you probably won't see me until then. Is less about that. It's more about what power means, like what female authored power means, and what is the difference between power and exploitation. So I can think in a less personal way now, but I will still always live with that anxiety and that fear. And I think someone asked me about imposter syndrome, and that's something that comes from being very successful early on, or being judged like this is a person who will be successful. The world is wide open for them. But that's a terrifying place to be, because the bigger the world is, the more ways there are to go wrong. But also the more ways there are to go right. Anyway, I have to go. But this has been me, Olivie Blake, not writing. Happy Galloween if I don't do another one until then. But yeah, happy Galloween. Happy Alone with You in the Ether Day. And I'll see you next time.